Hello and welcome to this segment on creating an offline RHEL repo. Let's begin. There are many reasons why you would want to mirror an entire repo and keep it at your disposal. For instance, if you had an air-gapped lab that has RHEL machines in it that need updates, you can use this method to pass RHEL updates to those machines. In this video, we are going to create a virtual machine and we're going to install RedHat 7. This VM will be connected to the internet so we can mirror a repo. Then we're going to create another RHEL VM without an internet connection and mount that repo that we mirrored and update that standalone VM. I'm going to be using VMware Workstation to set up my VMs. Let's make a new container. On VMware Workstation, click File, click New Virtual Machine. On this screen, select the Custom Advanced option and then click Next. We're going to leave these at the default for this screen. Here on this screen, we're going to select the third option down. I will install the operating system later. Here on this screen, just select the version of Linux you're installing. I'm using RHEL 7, so I'm going to keep this one as is. Feel free to give your virtual machine a nickname. Alright. Here on this screen, you can set up your CPU settings as you wish. If you're not sure, you can always just follow along with me. I'm going to give my machine 4 gigs of RAM. Here on this screen, we're going to leave this as default. This one will also be default. And default. Here we're going to select the option to create a new virtual disk. Something to consider here, repos can be rather large. Be sure to give yourself plenty of space when creating the virtual disk. I estimated the RHEL 7 repos around 56 gigs in size. Add another 16 gigs if you wish to sync EPEL repos. In my case, I'm going to use an external hard drive, so I'm going to keep my drive size at around 100 gigs and store it as a single file. Also, be sure that where you're saving your virtual machine has enough space. Here's a summary of all the settings that we set up for our virtual machine. Feel free to look them over and click Finish. We have successfully created our container for our Linux box. Now we're going to go into the settings and change a couple of things. So we're going to need to be able to boot from our Linux ISO. So I'm going to go ahead and browse to it and attach it to the virtual machine's optical drive. Also, there's a couple of extra pieces of hardware in here that we don't need. So I'm going to go ahead and get rid of the sound card and the printer. And lastly, because I'm going to be using an external hard drive through the virtual machine's USB controller, I'm going to upgrade it to a USB 3.0 controller. And turn off the share Bluetooth devices and click OK. So now that we have our virtual machine set up and our ISO image mounted, it's time to power on the machine. Alright, so it looks like we're successfully booting from the ISO. Use the arrow keys on your keyboard and press the up arrow and press enter to install Linux. Alright, so we're finally at the RedHat install screen. Let's go ahead and click on the continue button. Inside the software selection area, I'm going to keep it on minimal install and select the packages that you think you might need. If you're not sure which ones you might need, feel free to just follow along. Use your mouse wheel to scroll down and select Installation Destination. Now I'm just going to make this a basic installation of Linux, so I'm just going to keep a lot of this stuff at default. So on this screen, make sure you have a check mark over your volume and that automatic partitioning is selected. Now let's go to the network and host name section and tick the network adapter on. So it looks like everything on this window has been satisfied. So let's click begin installation. Don't forget to click here to set your root password. Alright, sweet. So it looks like our installation is now complete. Click the reboot button. So after the system reboots, you should be here at the login screen. So we're going to log in with that root password we set earlier. So log in as root and put in your password that you set and press enter. Remember, this is just a basic setup of Linux. I'm not here to demonstrate security practices. I'm saving that for another video. But for now, we are just demonstrating how to mirror a RHEL repo so we can use it on offline systems. With that in mind, let's move forward. Now we're going to be using the Yum package manager, but before we can do that, we have to register and subscribe our RedHat VM to a RedHat subscription. If you do not have a RedHat subscription, you can go get one by signing up for a free developer account. Once you sign up for a developer account, your subscription will be good for 1 year. So we want to use RedHat's repos. We can add other repos like CentOS repos. We can add them manually, but that's beyond the scope of this video. As you can see here, Yum does not work. But after we register and subscribe to our RedHat subscription, Yum will start working with the RedHat repos. To register and subscribe your VM, use the subscription manager command. After you enter that command, it's going to ask you for your username and password. Alright, perfect. So it looks like our RedHat machine was registered. Now it's time to subscribe using the subscription manager command, as shown above. Alright, great. So the subscription was successful. Now I'm going to run a yum update test command to see if we can reach the repos. Great. So it looks like we can reach the repos. Looks like I got a lot of updates, but I'm going to answer no and update this later. So now it's time to play with the Yum package manager. We have to grab a couple things before we can start mirroring a repo. We need something called reposync. So I'm going to use the what provides to find out which package that command or that program is inside of. It looks like my program belongs in a package called yum utils, so we're going to install that now with the yum install yum utils command. And there we have it. That is installed and ready to use. So the next thing we're going to get is something called createrepo. I'm going to use, once again, what provides createrepo to see what package it's inside of. And it looks like createrepo is its own package. So I'm going to use the yum install createrepo tac y to install that package. Okay, great. So createrepo is installed, but I have to grab something because I'm using an external hard drive that's formatted with NTFS, and I can't mount NTFS natively in RHEL without the extra support. So I'm going to download that. You can follow along if you like, otherwise you can skip ahead. Alright, NTFS support is installed. I can now mount my external hard drive that is NTFS formatted. In case any of you are following along and you are doing the same method with an external hard drive, this should help you. Also, in case any of you are curious, EPEL is another repo that you can sync it as well, so you can use that on offline RHEL boxes. But in my case, I'm going to disable it so it doesn't sync it. I'm just interested in RHEL's repos by themselves. Okay, now I'm going to plug in my external hard drive and I'm going to pass it through to my Cheddarbox VM so I can mount it. Now I'm going to run the list block device command, which is going to show me current block devices that are available on my Linux box. It looks like my hard drive that I plugged in is SDB. I was able to identify it by looking at the size. It's a 500 gig SSD. So now it's time to mount it. I'm going to use the mount command, the device SDB partition 2, and I'm going to put that on the mount directory. Now I'm going to change directory over to that device, cd/mount. Now I'm going to start setting up my drive to receive repo data. So I'm going to make a new folder, mkdir tacp repo. In this new repo folder that we made, this is where the repo data is going to go when we start syncing it from the internet. And at last, it is time to run the reposync command. So it's reposync tacp/mount/repo, or wherever you decide you want to put it. That's up to you. Now this is going to take a while, so go grab a coffee, a beer, and relax and keep an eye on it. Alright, it's finished. If you didn't have any errors, it should be ready for the next command. Now it's time to move on to creating some repo databases. Now that we have all the data, we need to make some databases. So let's change over to the mount directory and then list the contents and change to repo and do an LL. And then we have our RHEL packages here. Let's CD over to RHEL. There we go. You use the tab to finish the command and do an LL. There's packages, CD to packages, and do an LS, and there's all our RPM data. Now it's time to move on to running the createrepo command. You're going to want to point the createrepo directory to the packages directory, which is one directory up from the RPM data. So once you have that command put in, go ahead and press enter, and the createrepo command is going to spawn some workers, and it's going to parse through all that RPM data that we mirrored from the RHEL repo, and it's going to make databases out of them. Alright, so this is going to take a while. So sit back, relax, and keep an eye on it. Okay, if everything went smooth, you shouldn't have any errors, and you should be back to where it's ready for another command. Now we're going to check the repo data that was created. So let's change directory over to our mount, repo, RHEL data, and packages directory. And if you do a ls, you should see a new folder in there called repo data. This is where all those databases I was talking about is created. So let's go into that directory, and there's all the information and databases that were created. And we are pretty much done on this VM. Now it's time to take our repo data to our offline RHEL box and set it up as a repo. Let's do it. Okay, we are over on our new VM Cheez-It box. I just made it, and we're going to log into it with root. And okay, password. All right, and we're going to change directory over to the hard drive. I already have it mounted. I went ahead and did all that stuff ahead of time. If you need to know how to do this, just watch the first part of the video. All right, so we're going to switch over to the packages directory and go to our repo data. And in here, there's a file called repomd.xml. That is the file that the Yum package manager is going to parse for data. Just keep that in mind for when we set up our repo. So now we're going to go ahead and run the Yum update command. I want to show you something really quick. If you look here, it's complaining that we're not part of an entitlement server, a RedHat entitlement server, because we don't have a subscription tied to it. We're going to go ahead and fix that because we don't need that since this is an offline VM. There are ways you can add a subscription to an offline server, but that is beyond the scope of this video. The reason we are getting that entitlement message is because of a subscription manager plugin that's enabled, but we're just going to turn off plugins altogether. So to turn off plugins, we need to modify the etsy-yum.conf file, and inside there is a option called plugins. We just want to turn that 1 to a 0 and then save it. And that should fix our Yum issue with the entitlement server. So let's test that right now. Let's do a Yum update. And as you can see, the message for entitlement server is gone. So our final step, we need to create a repo file. So we need to go to etsy yum.repos.d, and we're going to touch a file, and I guess we're going to call it offline repo. So touch offline.repo. All right, do ls, and there it is. So let's edit that file. So we need to put the following values inside this file. I'm going to put it up here on the screen. Just copy it and put it in there, and then save it. Something worth mentioning, no spaces are allowed in the top brackets where it says offline underscore repo. Don't put any spaces in there. Use an underscore or a hyphen. And naturally, if you're doing this a little bit different from the way I'm doing it, just replace the directory under the base URL file with your directory, and always leave off one directory above the folder of repo data, because repo data is assumed when the Yum package manager looks for the repomd.xml file. Okay, now that we have our repo made and we saved it, now it's time to take it for a test drive. We're going to do a Yum update and see what happens. And voila, look at that. It is reading our repo data from our hard drive, not an internet connection, and I'm going to go ahead and update the system with that data. So now you could take this hard drive to your offline RedHat servers or systems, and you can update them. And every once in a while you could just reposync the data again. it will go through and verify if you have it or not. When you do a repo sync, it will download only the new files from a repo, and you could just follow the same steps on getting that data over to your offline systems. There's many ways to do it. I chose to use a NTFS formatted hard drive. You can use Blu-ray disc if you want. You can use a NAS over in your lab. It's really up to you. This is just to demonstrate how one way you could do it. In one lab that I worked in, I put all the data on a NAS we had inside the lab, and I just mounted the NAS share onto the Linux boxes and hosted the repo on the NAS, and it worked great. But that's going to do it for now. I really appreciate you watching this video. I had a blast making it, and I hope to make more in the future. If you have any questions, put them in the comment below. Like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video. Thank you.